time. Thanks for joining us in today's Human-Centric Lab event. As I mentioned a minute ago, I'm excited for our keynote speaker, Steve, our distinguished panelists. These breakout sessions we'll get to enjoy together all over the next 90 minutes. But let me kick this off by introducing our host, Michael Grove. Many of you know already. Mike has a vision that, together we can shape the world of work. It can be more engaging, more productive and delightful, for customers, for workers alike, even with some simple but powerful inputs like his CollabWorks framework. So for years, Mike's gathered these thought and practice leaders around Silicon Valley through Disrupt HR. You might have been a part of, some of you. But now since COVID, he's expanded globally with our Human-Centric Labs here. I'm delighted to be a part of. And I really appreciate Mike for his capacity to inspire gatherings like this and kind of in a Margaret Mead-like belief he has, like she said, and I get this sensibility from you, Mike, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens, right, can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So again, Mike, thank you for gathering us and for facilitating, putting together another powerful and informative event like this. Mike?
Well, thank you very much, Jay. What an introduction. Pretty hard to follow that one. Yes, well, welcome to Human-Centric Labs. And as Jay said, we started this actually in February of this year, before COVID, but obviously COVID came in pretty well early. And our passion, our mission really is to change the way we work. And I've been a CEO for over years. I know the top-down P&L drill. Trust me, I know that drill. But I think what I've learned all these years is that basically the magic starts with people. And if you get the people right, the profits come. And if you get the people right, the profits come enough where we can actually share some of those profits in this new generation of what we call stakeholder value, where it includes the planet and our community. So that's what we're about. So next slide. So actually, you're back one slide, would you?
Absolutely.
There you go. So what we really are doing is we're looking at the world from a different direction. So we've been used to for centuries now of driving work down through the organizational structure to people. And what we're doing now is we're flipping that around and we're saying there's a new paradigm that starts with people. And so we want to apply this now to this problem called the workplace. And so we call it the workplace, or the adaptive workplace strategy. So let me take you through that one nod here at a time. So we know where we were. Okay, we started out in February with the COVID problem. It was a panic, and Kate's going to share more about that process as we've evolved. But the next step is we're now in COVID, and we've learned now that, wow, we actually can survive, and we've done a lot better than most people expected. We're starting to emerge out of COVID, okay? And we're going to the next slide, next step. We're going to basically now get to where we are beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel, that the actual office is going to be viable at some point. So whether it's at the end of the year after the vaccine is available, if it's available, or Q1 or Q2, it's going to be viable. So now the question is, now what? Okay, so next point. So our view is, let's not top down that. Let's not just do the same old thing, we'll put together some rules and people will follow the rules. Let's do more than that. Let's realize that people are individuals with different needs and different problems, and let's now connect those dots in what we call the adaptive workplace, where people can have a say in what they can actually do to do their best work. So that's the essence of what we want to do with this adaptive workplace. And we have a goal, okay? So one of them is to basically minimize managing. If you think about it, what we don't want to do is duplicate the same old strategy we had before. We want to basically provide more autonomy, okay? Secondly, we want to find better uses for talent. If we're going to be virtual, why are we stuck in job roles? Why not be able to move around in different projects and so forth and be, quote, more agile? And we believe those two things, the use of talent, reducing managing, are going to produce motivation, which guess what produces profits and allows us to give back to the planet. So with that, it's now my pleasure to tell us to move on to the next step, which is to introduce Jay. And Jay and I, as you can tell, are connected in terms of what we want in this life at this point in time. And that is to really help not just a one or two, but a very significant transformation in the way we work across lots of companies. He shared his purpose a week ago or so with our whole team, and to just be really kind about, I think by sharing that with you, he wants to help people live their full humanity and potential. And I love that. Now, Jay comes with us with a rich background, including in Agile. So he was an executive at Accenture, and he basically has helped Accenture do significant business transformations using Agile inside Accenture and as well with major companies. So with that, it's my warm and feeling here to introduce Jay as our MC. Jay, take it from now.
Thanks for that, Mike. Just some logistics. I remind everyone to please keep on mute during our keynote and panel discussions. However, please let your voice be heard by entering any questions or comments that come to mind into the Zoom chat at any time. When it comes to mind, just plop it in there. We'll be monitoring it the whole time during today's event. And we will have a time for Q&A with our keynote speaker and the panelists together in a little bit. So the chat button you can find in Zoom at the bottom of the screen, and you may have to mouse over it to reveal it. So, boy, now it's my honor to introduce today's keynote speaker, Steve Denning, who I've had the privilege to know and work with over many years. Steve, you can go ahead and share your desktop and get your slides loaded up. And while you're doing that, I'd like to share a few more words about Steve. Have you ever read a book that changed your life? It's had that much impact on you? Well, Steve's 2010 book, Radical Management, it changed my life, and it became the basis of my courses at the university and corporate workshops and really consulting across business agility for 21st century organizations. So I deeply also appreciate Steve for living out what he advocates. So unlike many business thought leaders, renowned leaders, Steve is actually quite generative and collaborative, agile. And as a result, I think he's shaped and accelerated the movement for the transformation of the world of work more than anyone I know. So along with Steve's 8 books on organizational leadership and transformation, he has more than 800 columns on Forbes.com. Check him out there. And Steve is hands-on with a group of companies through his learning consortium. And so he has direct access to what's happening now on the ground at companies, especially as they're facing the COVID crisis and the radical shifts that are happening for remote work. So thank you, Steve, for joining us today. And I look forward to your recent insights.
Thanks, Jay, and happy to be with you all. And you asked me to say a word about what working virtually will be like for the future. And I kind of got into this issue around April when I read a lot of things about how people and offices and firms were struggling with working virtually. And so I convened a meeting of the companies in the Learning Consortium about how they were experiencing it. And to my surprise, they were all extremely positive. Personally, they were positive and their firms were positive. And so I wondered what was going on. I mean, I have to say that there are 2 kinds of people in the world, those who put people into 2 kinds of groups and those who don't. And I'm one of those people. So I was happy that I was able to put people into 2 groups. One, people who are liking working virtually, and those that don't. And so I started to look into why was this so. And Those who loved working from home told me for them it was more productive. They were getting more done. There was less bullshit work. There was better teamwork. There was more fun. You could actually get access to your boss for once. That they were basically more available than they used to be. People living in California were no longer spending 4 hours commuting each day, which was a pretty big plus. And they rediscovered their private life and their family. It was true that some of them found the kids a bit of a struggle, but come to think of it, they had 4 extra hours to deal with some of that. So overall, they were just extremely positive. And these people wanted working from home to go on to be a permanent option, and many of the firms are thinking of actually doing that, as you would have read in the press. Then turning to those who hate working from home, they split into 2 groups again. One was that it made a bad experience worse. These were people who already found the office bad. They were having physical meetings, which were boring, and they were becoming unbearable video conferences. Emails were piling up. They were getting random instructions, new to-dos. Micromanagement was getting even worse. So it wasn't that they loved the office, but they were seeing the office as the lesser of 2 evils. And they found their micromanagers wanted to have them back so that they could find out what they'd been up to and where they were screwing up and how to get them back on track. And I ran into last week, actually, after the death of David Graeber, who wrote this wonderful book, Bullshit Jobs. He's a professor was a professor of anthropology at the London School of Economics, and actually scientifically looked into the question of bullshit jobs. And this is something that I'd often discussed with Jay and others in bars late at night at conferences. What is the proportion of jobs which are bullshit jobs, which have no point? And and those bar discussions generally range from 20% to 60% or more. David Graeber actually did some surveys, and for European companies at least, it seemed to be around 40%. 40% of the work was being done. Wasn't only that it was served no purpose, but the people who were doing it saw that it served no purpose, but still kept on doing it. And his book's very interesting. He split the bullshit jobs into 5 groups. There were flunkies who were basically there to make the boss look important. There were goons who ran interference for the organization, lobbyists and corporate lawyers. There were what he called duct tapers, who put duct tape on problems. They didn't solve the problems, but they patched them up with duct tape. There were box tickers who ticked boxes for the people who hadn't done things right. And they often created more work for the duct tapers. And then there were the taskmasters, who micromanagers, who basically were checking up on people were doing the things that they were meant to be doing. And so a very interesting book and a fun read, and strongly recommend it. And that really explains a lot of what people are hating about the office. There's a huge amount of work that is simply has no point. The other group that hated working from home were those who actually loved the office, not because necessarily they loved the work, but this is where they socialize. This is where they hang out. This is where they make friends. Their life revolves around their friends in the office. And for them, the office is hardly about work at all. It's about friendships and relationships. And so I can understand, yeah, they would not be particularly happy if they couldn't hang out with their friends in the office. And third group is those who have a serious reason for wanting to be in the office. It is, I think, clear that for some things you do need to actually get together. If you're onboarding new staff, if you're rebuilding relationships, if you're discussing a deep change, and maybe for some high-end creative work. There's a book just published this week by Reed Hastings, The chief executive of Netflix, who concluded in a fairly blunt statement, there is nothing good about working virtually, which seems to be a fairly definitive judgment. And maybe for his work, that's true. Maybe if you're making movies, maybe you do have to be actually getting together. But certainly for the groups that I've been dealing with, the companies in the Learning Consortium, they found it generally a net positive. I also found the New Yorker had a very interesting article about this and concluded, as I had concluded, that those who love working virtually are those practicing agile management. And one of the speakers in the preparation session said they hoped this session would remove their fear of agile. And I hope that maybe I can do a little bit about removing the fear of agile. I mean, agile management is really creating a workplace where human beings are creating value for other human beings. Human beings creating value for other human beings. If that's a frightening idea, I'd like to know what is frightening about it, because there's three very simple and very powerful principles. One is that the purpose of the firm, the purpose of the organization is to deliver value to the users and customer for whom the organization is supposedly delivering value to. And so that each job, each position, each piece of work you're doing should be able to see who is the person who is getting value from this piece of work. And if you can't see that, if you can't see a human being who's getting value from the piece of work, you need to be asking, why are you doing it? And that's what agile management essentially does, systematically sets up work in such a way as that everybody is focused on delivering value to our customers. And the work is typically done in small teams, self-organizing teams, working in short cycles, so that you know whether in fact you're making progress towards delivering value to the people to whom you're meant to be delivering value. And the firm works as a network, not as a top-down hierarchy of authority, but a network of competence where ideas can come from anywhere, and not just from the top, but from sideways and from the bottom. Anyone who has a good idea should be able to bring that to these. So Agile is about making that happen on a systematic basis across tiny organizations, middle-sized organizations, and now huge organizations like the most valuable organizations on the planet. And when you do this, what's striking in the site visits that Jay and I made is we found that people loved working in this way. That if we asked them, would you ever go back to working in the old way? They said, I would leave. I would go somewhere else because there is no other way. In this way, work becomes coherent and cohesive. Where you do it hardly matters, whether you're in the office or at home, because you're totally focused on delivering value to someone else. And as I say, those who love Agile, who love working from home, are mainly these Agile organizations. And these firms have found not just that it's good for the individuals, but there is an acceleration of the move to digital collaboration. There's less time wasted in unproductive meetings, greater accessibility to others. Processes were being reinvented on the fly, and even though kids at home were a problem, it was manageable. And these are fairly large firms. They're American Express, they're Ericsson, they're in health, telecommunications, construction, transportation. They're obviously not firms that are radically disrupted like restaurants and hotels. And the workforce is largely high-end professional, requiring collaboration. So it's obviously not a typical selection of people at work, but nevertheless fairly well advanced in digital work and implementing Agile principles. So for them, this moving to virtual work was almost a non-event. And the history of working virtually, it actually goes back really about 40 years, and it got a big push about 20 years ago when people started to see that it was possible to work at home. And and maybe it would be a good idea if they could, they'd ran into 3 roadblocks. The technology at the time, 20 years ago, was slow. You didn't have Zoom. Bureaucracy was almost universal, and agile was still being born. And the agile doctrine itself promoted face-to-face work. When people were trying to figure out how to operate in an agile fashion, they found that, in fact, getting started working face-to-face was a good idea. But what we found is that once we know how to do that, it's not such a big deal to be working virtually. And so agile firms have now surprised themselves to some extent. This is actually better. And because the financial savings in real estate, if you don't need large offices, really a huge encouragement to go in that direction. And this really is part of a vast global revolution that's happening that I noted in the book, that bytes are defeating atoms, that we're now in a world where every personal thing can connect with every other personal thing on the planet instantly at 0 cost. I mean, every time I say that, I marvel at that fact. Every person and thing can communicate with every other person or thing on the planet instantly at 0 cost. That means that everything we human beings do can be reinvented to be done quicker, more easily, more conveniently, more effectively. It also raises possibilities of horrible things happening, but it certainly means that everything that we do is being reinvented, and this working virtually phase we're going through this year is simply an acceleration of what that whole thing is about. And the world is learning how to do things digitally. And as usual, the traditionalists mourn the loss of the old ways. Plato lamented the discovery of writing, and the church bemoaned the printing press in the 20th century. Telephone, radio, television were claimed to be disasters, and now the people say the internet is the end of the world as we know it. But in fact, our lives have been enormously benefited by being able to access knowledge and music and entertainment, shopping, and a life is simple, quicker, more convenient, and better. So why not also transform work? So in the broad sweep of history, it's interesting that if you look back thousands of years, initially we were doing things face-to-face in tribes. Then we had writing and printing, and that led to hierarchies and kingships and impersonal markets. But with digital, we're back in the world of tribes again. We're back in the world where everyone can know everyone. Everyone is on the same level, and our reputation in a network is visible to all. And so once again, cooperation becomes the best way to work together. So I'm tremendously optimistic that this has the potential to lead to a better world.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I always appreciate your optimism. We're going to continue this discussion for a few more minutes. I'm going to invite Mike and you to chat and just bring a little more conversation to this. So hang on and thank you, Mike.
Yes, Steve, that was wonderful. It just flowed right out of your mouth like a really nice wine sipping. So yeah, we talked before, we're kind of we're in the same genre. We love this idea of starting with the person and who they connect to and so forth. I just imagine with a lot of people here today, their organizations are probably not exactly where you're saying people could be. For example, you mentioned quite a few companies that are already quite agile, but companies that frankly aren't that agile. And a lot of companies, I think, that are thinking that, well, as soon as we can get these people back to work, we need to get them back here because we don't know what they're doing and they could be running off the track, and how are we going to make our quarterly earnings? So if you had to give some advice, given the successes that you've seen and kind of, how they got started, what would be, could you kind of come up with a 1, 2, 3 of saying, well, if you really want to plant a seed of agile management in your organization, if it's not there, or maybe it's just only somewhat there, let's say in software, could you give some advice maybe to the group here as to how to move from A to B?
Well, one thing would be to find out what this whole movement is about. As I've written many, many articles, and you read my articles at zero cost on Forbes, read my books, but just find out what this whole movement is about. There's nothing to be frightened about human beings working for other human beings. And that's really a rather old and wonderful idea. It's just putting it in practice in a modern context. And in bringing it down to earth, you could start to ask, well, how much of my work today is spent delivering value for other human beings? And which parts of my work are not serving any other human being? Which parts of the work are simply serving some internal purpose, some cog in the corporate wheel of whatever's going on? And is there a way in which you can start to say, well, why am I doing this? Why am I doing the work that is serving no human being, that is supposedly serving some wider thing? Why don't I lobby to actually change the organization so that we start to focus everything that we do on work that is actually delivering value for other human beings? And of course, in a bureaucracy, you will run into flack, you will run into objections. The boss will tell you, you've got to do it, shut up and go back and get on with the job. That is what I've been told my whole life as I moved to make these changes happen. I spent several decades in the World Bank being told that and taking no. I was polite from time to time, but eventually I was able to prevail. And then when I left the World Bank, this whole agile movement is has run into objections from all sorts of people. This is pointless. This is chaos. Stop bothering us. But when the most valuable firms on the planet, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, Netflix, Tesla, are all pursuing this way of running the organization, and they're now worth about 40% of the whole stock market, worth almost more than the rest of the Fortune 500. People are starting to say, well, maybe there's something in this. Maybe this is not some bullshit idea. Maybe this is something we should look into. And certainly the management is trying to figure out how to do it. But it is a deep change. But you can start right now asking, and I'll actually be asking you later in this session, how much bullshit is there in your organization? How much bullshit work is going on in your organization?
No, I love that. Well, one of the things that I, as you know, like to talk about is this word called managing. And we've been taught, I was taught, and ran several companies now, that you manage to get the right work done. And you need all those managers as you add people to get the right work done. But it turns out that management, just over time, as it gets thicker and broader, it's all overhead, right? And so I think one of the things that could help these companies, and I'm curious as to your reaction to this, is to really be clear about, okay, what managing do we really need to get the right work done? And that's why I think Agile fits this so beautifully, because if you start with the individual who's actually producing value, and they're connected to the customers that they're delivering value, then the question is, well, what additional management do we need in order to make sure that the value is what they need to deliver? And the answer is far less than what most of today's organizations have. So have you run into these companies where they've got now metrics and ways to help people really understand more clearly where the waste is and how they can get at it?
Well, it starts from asking, who are the customers and what do they need, and how can we provide more value to them? That becomes the obsession throughout the organization. I mean, Jeff Bezos has an empty chair in every meeting and says this empty chair is for the most important person in the whole company. That is the customer. This meeting is about that chair, about what we can do for that chair, what can we do for that person. That's what this whole organization is about. And he recognizes that he doesn't necessarily have the best ideas, that particularly as you get into high-end work, the best ideas are often, unusually, if they are in the minds of the top managers, they are in the minds of other people. And management got off on the wrong foot. And actually, the term comes from the Italian word maneggiare, which is to ride a horse. So the idea of management is the manager is riding on your back like the rider of the horse. And that, for the 2020, is an absolutely nonsensical concept of what we should be doing. The manager should be an enabler, someone who is enabling people to create value for others. But it starts from the purpose of the organization has to be to create value for customers. If the purpose of the organization is to make the money for the company, then you are lost, because that is a goal that doesn't inspire anyone, and no one is going to be energized to deliver that goal. And so you immediately get back to managerial, you get back to bureaucracy and compelling people to make money for the company. But if you start out with the goal of the company, as Peter Drucker said, is to create value for the customer, and making money is the result of creating value for the customer, not the goal, then that's an inherently inspiring goal. Most people would like to deliver value for other people. It becomes a meaningful way of living. And so it really starts at the top to make it happen, but the revolution typically begins at the bottom. The revolution begins at someone in the middle or the lower part of the organization says, this is crazy. I am spending my life doing things that make no sense at all, that aren't adding value to anyone. I am dispirited doing it, and the customers are even more frustrated. We have to do something differently. And that's how it started in Microsoft, and a tiny sort of one team went to 25 teams to 400 teams, and then the whole organization. So this can start small, and so why not today? Why not everyone in your organization start to ask, why are we not agile? Why are we not delivering value for customers? Why aren't we not totally focused on that? Why aren't all our jobs focused on that purpose? And you'll get flack, but that's the beginning of the revolution.
I think this is probably a really good place to wind this up. I did want to ask you one quick question. I'm not sure you can give us a quick answer, but there is this struggle. I've noticed it because I've been working this for several years. So this resistance, though, to what you're saying, from the top, especially. So how do you see this playing out over the next, let's just say 3 years from now, given post-COVID? What would be your kind of vision of where things are in the mindset of these senior executives, let's say 2 or 3 years from now?
3 years from now, Harvard Business School will be teaching agile management. The Harvard Business Review will be talking all about agile. Consultants will be focused totally on creating agile organizations. The other organizations won't exist. Most of them are, a large number of them are already in bankruptcy. If you look at the department stores, most of the stores that you know are already in bankruptcy. That's just the beginning of what we're going to be seeing over the next couple of years.
Well, thank you. I think it's been a wonderful discussion. And I think, Jay, is the time for us to hand it back to you?
Yeah, we have a panel coming up, but thank you so much, Stephen and Mike. That's really brought some good points. We got some good chat going. So Steve's generously agreed to stay with us for the remainder of our time. So we'll have a combined Q&A session with Steve and our panelists. So keep your comments and questions coming. I see even some folks chatting with each other on the subject already. So that's awesome. So now I have the joy to introduce Kate North. And Kate, for 25 years, has brought her understanding of cultural anthropology combined with her eye for design and bringing those to the workspaces where she helps align, the sense of meaning that we get from a place with our human place in it. So getting those aligned in great ways. She's a leader of in the design of the future workspaces, and she also leads her tribe at the Global Network of Workspace Evolutionaries. So I really appreciate, particularly Kate now, how you're helping us all to understand how to grapple, with the meaning of our workspaces now that so many of us have been distributed out of them, right, to our homes. Like, how do we keep community and meaningful space impacting us and forwarding the mission of our organization? So we especially need your insights at a time like this. So Kate's assembled an all-star panel today, and she will introduce our panelists. So Kate, thank you so much for what you do in the world and for leading our panel today.
Oh, Jay, it's my pleasure. I'm delighted to be here. And Steve, thank you again for that wonderful inspiration. Boy, what an amazing opportunity we have right now to completely rethink how we work, regardless of where we work. I believe that within community, we will navigate a new path forward. Being surrounded by such bold thought leaders that we have today and that are in the panel are not only going to inspire us, but I think they're going to give us courage to take action. I promise if you remain fully present over the next 20 minutes, there will be new sparks of ideas that will come to you that you will begin to apply immediately. And I can't wait to introduce you to our three panelists. They're exceptional, as I believe their diverse personal experiences will stimulate your thinking and prepare you for the breakout sessions, which is your turn. But before I introduce them, I'd like to reflect back on some of the key learnings and insights that we've collectively experienced over the past 6 months. And then I'm going to highlight a few things that are starting to emerge. So let's start with this quote from Winston Churchill that I just love. And that is, never let a good crisis go to waste. And we're not going to let it go to waste when it comes to reimagining work. I'm going to be covering off a couple of ideas and certainly some data points that are all captured in our report. As a workplace strategist, I have to tell you, I have never had such an interesting professional time in my life. And I think my colleagues would all agree. Back in March, we got excited and we wanted to be able to understand what was going on as we all immediately had to deploy working from home globally. What did that mean? What did we learn? And those data points, as well as the findings and deeper meanings from those learnings, are all couched directly in that report, of which I believe Michael has sent out generously to everybody before we started the session. But if you don't have a copy of it, let me know. I'll be happy to help you review that afterwards, because we're going to move kind of fast so we can spend most of the time with our panelists. One of the other things is that we know that what happened in March and April when we first deployed is very different than where we are today. And we're going to be launching a new survey that will be starting on September 15th. And we'll make sure you all get a link to that. Okay, so let's kind of talk a little bit about what has happened to us over the course of the past 6 months. When I was preparing for this and talking with Michael and Anthony, I realized that the Kubler-Ross change curve, I was preparing for some change management work, actually depicted remarkably well what we've gone through and what we've experienced. So let's start out with being shocked. Do you guys remember February and March? We deployed quickly. IT teams had to rally, get laptops going, get people up on Teams and Zoom, and make sure the security was in place. Organizations quickly formed COVID task forces. Chairs and monitors disappeared from the office. And we found that those organizations that had experience actually with a work from home program or a flexible work program were much more prepared than, say, a law firm that hadn't digitized or were still dependent on nearby assistance. And the good news is that despite all of this, we did it. We did it globally, the single largest work from home experience ever. Employees reported increase in productivity. They felt that their managers could support them virtually. They felt connected to their teams, and even their well-being was increased. Leaders and managers that were resistant to work from home were suddenly convinced. In fact, you might even remember conversations like, well, why do we need a workplace? Let's all just work from home. Well, let's move into April, May. So we're into denial. So we're in denial. So what do? We focus on getting back to the office, or the RTO, or return to office. So there's a flurry of activity that starts to emerge. We're leveraging the CDC guidelines, rethinking existing offices, the density, adhering to 6-foot guidelines and social distancing. We're bringing in temperature checks. We're looking at air quality, ordering PPO supplies, understanding legal implications, understanding who might be considered essential. Initially, we thought finance would be essential, but when we realized that they could work from home, we started to question who was actually essential. We started to formalize that return to the office, and we started at the same time getting a lot of mixed information on COVID, what was truth, what's really, what is the issue in terms of safety. We started looking at mass transit and then the ability to get tests. There were furloughs and layoffs. Some of the realities of work from home started to set in, especially those with children, roommates, and had elder care. Some employees were eager to come back, while others were getting more concerned about returning to the office for their safety. And concerns are about those that can't work from home now, or people wanted to start coming in. We saw at that point organizations starting pushing back to the return to office date until late after Labor Day or the elections. And then we move into June and July, which is really frustration. So we're starting to see city by city, country by country, these different spikes starting to occur or reappear. There's social unrest now. It's accelerating. We've got greater economic impact. Borders are closing. Supply chains are impacted. Employee stress is continuing to accelerate. So things that they thought were novel back in the shocked February, March period, like Zoom, they were getting fatigue. And some of the team building that was being forced on them was not necessarily desirable any longer. They're working longer hours, especially those with kids, and they wanted to have more of that separation between office and home. Some organizations declare the return to office date is now going to be maybe 2021 as a way to be able to help employees get a little bit more stabilized. And when that happened, we started seeing employees starting to think, should I leave San Francisco and go to Park City, Utah, or someplace else which they can, have more affordable living? So we started seeing that happen. And then the compensation discussions with HR started to emerge, as well as taxation. However, what we started to see is that there were some progressive organizations that had already been remote, maybe from the get-go, that were starting to kind of show the way forward. And new ideas, and there was an interest around being able to actually see what might begin to happen. In June and July, we're hitting depression. And the unknowingness of all of this is just taking its whole toll. We're seeing greater concerns for people's jobs. Anxiety is at an all-time high. It's impacting our health, our well-being, and organizations are starting to see the impact on engagement and performance. The reality issues of work from home are starting to emerge, so people realize that they need to have proper setups. They're not ergonomically set up, so stipend conversations began to happen. Flex hours started to be adopted. And leaders and managers that initially they thought that they could do it, sustaining a distributed team requires a different skill set. And it requires leaders managing by results rather than line of sight. Employee productivity is starting to dwindle. There's some exhaustion for others. Team tension can build. And they become desperate for that good old-fashioned face-to-face water cooler conversation. And while reality is that this is going to be the new norm, and it's looming, but there are still those that are embracing remote work as an opportunity, and we're starting to hear more of those types of studies. So now, as we get into September, we're getting into the orange. We are in experiment mode, and it's the perfect timing for that. More and more organizations need a path forward that ignites engagement and productivity of their employees. Adoption of new technologies to improve efficiencies and reduce the friction are starting to be deployed. Organizations are really starting to more thoroughly collect their own data and analyze what is happening within their own organization and with their employees. They're hosting focus groups so those employees can be heard and we can focus in on some of that important improvement. And some are even beginning to do some scenario modeling, looking at what ifs. And many of the clients that I work with as a strategist are really trying to investigate what would a hybrid workplace where we can work from home, but we can come to the office also to be able to collaborate and connect and get that good feeling of culture. But I don't know about you, but I'm ready to just exhale and bring in what is possible.
Thanks, Kate.
So,
this is awesome. And I think a lot of us are relating to it. And we're excited to hear from your panel as well. So we can get on.
absolutely. Let me introduce you to them. Jennifer Smith is the EVP of Technology and Operations and Chief Information Officer at Zions Bancorp, a multi-state $67 billion bank holding company. Kalandra Krushank is the founder and CEO of Statebook International. It's a digital location intelligence platform that provides strategic economic insight to inform optimal locations and real estate investments. And Doug Kirkpatrick is a best-selling author, speaker, and management consultant at New Focus Strategic Group. Doug is a leading authority on the concept of self-management, which you're going to hear more about, and the impact at an individual and at an organizational level. So let's begin with the panel. Jennifer, I'm going to start with you. Welcome. Jennifer is this transformational change leader within a 147-year-old financial institution. And one thing I love about Jennifer is her unstoppable commitment to inclusivity, diversity, and compassion. And today, Jennifer will share her vision why space matters. As one of the largest tech employers in Utah, Zions Bank Corporation is designing a new 400,000 square foot, highly sustainable technology campus to attract talent, to foster innovation, and to reduce their overall costs. So welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you.
The question I have for you, knowing that you've got a 147-year-old organization and as ETO leading that charge, many of the team members that you have there are agile adopters and lovers. And I'm just curious, based upon your experience over the past 6 months, what have you learned?
I have learned so much. And first is a lot of our assumptions about how to complete and do agile work, as Stephen already mentioned, have changed. We were so focused on always being in person. All of our external agile consultants and coaches said, you have to get everybody in the office. No one can, we were flying people in so they could be in person. And now, when we complete some of our planning work and our program increment work, they've said, we are never going back to that non-virtual environment to complete some of that planning work because everybody gets to participate equally. And so that's been one of our biggest learnings is to challenge every assumption of how we do our work and be open to the possibility that it could be done differently.
That's wonderful. Do you see further adoption in other parts of the organization as well?
Of agile, what we see, we have been a lean organization, lean operational excellence for a long time, and the practices that we had there of both collaboration every day, of focusing on the customer, were already inherent in how we did our work. But seeing how quickly we deliver value now, our executive team across the companies, they've become a lot more willing to accept how agile work gets completed.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you. Kalandra, by leveraging expert economists, researchers, data scientists, business intelligence analysts, and unique technology, Kalandra's organization, Statebook, is driving effective strategies that are saving lives and propelling a more rapid return to economic stability, something we all want. And what I love about this wicked entrepreneur is her curiosity, her courage, and her deep instincts. So for example, when she started Statebook, her tech team insisted that she at least understand Agile. So she immediately jumped into the world of Agile and went through the training. And today, as an Agile organization, Statebook is also 100% virtual and distributed. They're able to attract wonderful talent around the world, and it's irregardless of where they live. And today, Calandra brings firsthand experience of both Agile and virtual to our conversation. So welcome, Calandra.
Thank you, Kate.
Can you tell us a little bit about how being an Agile and distributed organization has shaped your leadership and culture?
Sure. So as you mentioned, we had an outside development team initially building our software platform, and they insisted that I go to Agile product owner training school, which I did, only to find out that I was already running my company via Agile. I just didn't know that it was called that, and that I had actually run my previous company that way as well. But in going to Agile product owner training school, I learned a lot, and I learned a lot about the more formal aspects of Agile and Agile leadership. So for example, and in case there's anybody on this webinar who doesn't know actually what Agile is, we do 2-week sprints with our software development company. And so every Monday or every other Monday, we start with about an hour-long meeting where we get all of our developers and our team actually now in a room, and we talk about what our goals are for the next 2 weeks, and we think through the vision for the product for the next 2 weeks. It might be just a part of a larger project, or it might be a small bite-sized project that we can actually accomplish in 2 weeks. And every day we do 15-minute stand-ups where it's time-boxed, and you literally go through each person who says, here's what I'm working on today, here's what I did yesterday, here's where I need help. And so with that kind of transparency, you're building trust along the way with each step of the way, and everybody's contributing to the conversation. Everybody understands how they fit into the greater whole of the organization, of the product, of what we're trying to accomplish. And at the end of the 2 weeks, on that following Friday, we do a meeting where there's a reveal of all of the work that has been accomplished in that 2-week time period. And so with that reveal, all of the work that has been done is literally product ready to be deployed. And it might just be a small piece, but because everybody's on the same page, everybody understands what's happening each day with the process, you have not only that transparency and trust, but you have the ability to pivot, to fail fast, to really react to what you're seeing in the marketplace and how times are changing and where your product needs to evolve, and be able to adapt to that very, very quickly. And so we not only run our software and tech team that way, but we also run our regular team that way. And we, have a small team because we're an entrepreneurial tech company. But I think that the same exact principles can be embraced by large global teams, just broken up into smaller bite-sized teams that can tackle and accomplish goals and then report back. And everybody, again, has that same level of transparency, trust. And a lot of the companies that we deal with that are customers are very concerned about, large global corporations, and we're working with their real estate teams, and they're concerned about adopting that level of agile. And I think that it's really important to understand that you don't actually lose culture in that way. You actually are building culture because there is so much trust developed between each of your different teammates. And as was earlier stated by Steve, there's a an ability for everybody to contribute and feel like they have responsibility for the whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. Well, now Doug offers a release from management purgatory and a path to freedom. What I love about Doug is his commitment to eliminating hierarchies and building environments in which leadership is wholly earned and people are motivated by love, passion, and creativity. Today, Doug brings his deep passion and expertise on team-based performance and self-management. Doug, welcome. Can you provide us with a high-level overview of what exactly is self-management and how can we begin to apply these concepts today?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. So I would say self-management is the absence of management of others. It's where individuals exercise their agency and autonomy and pursue value creation within whatever context they've chosen to associate, and where they optimize their effort and their activity and their own development as an individual in a career. So self-management is the absence of force and coercion. It's the impeccability of commitment making and commitment keeping. And if we think of it as a spectrum, one side of the spectrum being command and control, brittle, rigid hierarchy, costly bureaucracy, force and coercion and fear, and the other end of the spectrum being extreme self-management, where people are free to negotiate their own roles and responsibilities and voluntarily engage in defining those with the peers with whom they work. Then to the degree we can move organizations further towards self-management, people will be relatively better off. We will open up space for human happiness, harmony, prosperity, as well as business performance, business agility, and all the other good things of life. So my experience in business has been at the extreme end of the self-management spectrum, where people have ultimate authority for their own lives at work, where they're not subject to force and coercion. But any organization can move in that direction. It's just a matter of will. And I think as I was looking at the Kubler-Ross curve, I was thinking that what's going to get us through is a return to philosophy. And we don't spend enough time in the workplace, in the business world, thinking about philosophy, but it's quite important. And if we go back to 18th century German philosophers like Immanuel Kant, who said people are the end, they're never a means to an end, they're the actual end, and that people have free will. And self-management respects the free will of the individual human being. And so if we respect the free will of individuals, their walking, talking freedoms, we should not subject them to force and coercion. We should not shove them into boxes on an org chart. And traditional organizations basically started in 1841 with a train wreck on the eastern seaboard where people were killed. They brought in some investigators who determined that we need to assign blame. So we created the first business org chart to figure out who to blame. And we created departments and silos and bureaucratic structures and career paths and titles and authority structures. All that stuff is unnecessary in the world that Steve Denning described, where everyone can communicate with everyone else in the world at light speed, virtually for free. So we need to transcend the old bureaucratic world and get to a world where we give people their brains back at work, where we create organizations that are creative and innovative as the people who work inside them. And leaders need to be able to have the courage to offer that opportunity to the people in their organizations, to have the ethics, the caring, the kindness, compassion, empathy, coaching and mentoring that elevates people and gives them the confidence to move forward with a very good look at reality, but also a vision of a desired future state. So that's my short take on self-management.
It sounds like a good vision, Doug. I'm curious though, when we think about trying to lead with this level of awareness and to help this transformation. Do you think it's possible to do that virtually, or is face-to-face a better and more appropriate type of situation? Does it matter?
Yeah, I think it can be done virtually. We have to address all the challenges of doing things virtually. Some things can't be done virtually. The company I grew up in was a manufacturing company. We can't do that virtually. We have to be there to manufacture the products. But every job that can be automated will be automated at some point in the future, and every job in the future at some point will be a leadership job. So it's really incumbent on leaders to create more leaders, to teach leadership, and to build leadership into every product and service that every company provides. And to the degree we can do that virtually, obviously it's happened. We went from 30% to 60% in 3 weeks remote work. So wherever that percentage ends up, I'm sure we'll be fine. But we can certainly do as much as we can virtually, and whatever we can't, we'll just have to go to work.
Okay, well, thank you. And speaking of kind of culture and community, I had the pleasure of working with Jennifer on their workplace strategy for this technology campus, and I learned about the importance of culture that this 147-year-old company had and being together. And Jennifer, I'm just interested to hear your perspective of how this COVID experience has shaped what's going to become even more important to you as you think through the design and the final strategies of your new tech center.
I said that we heard some of our team members say, hey, we're never going to go back to these other ways of doing work. But at the same time, they have said, our relationships are so important to us, particularly those who are paid for their collaboration and creativity work, that they want to be back together, but in a different way. So we've created spaces in our design that allow people to come into the office that supports very project-oriented work, work when it needs to be done and when they feel like they can do it together, but also using technology that allows small group intimacy and inviting in people who might be somewhere else in the country because maybe they decided to move during this time and want to be able to still be plug into the team. So relationships are at our core. We might learn how to replicate relationships virtually, but I'm skeptical, having worked virtually around the globe for many years, that the richness will ever be able to be duplicated. But I could be wrong. We'll see what we learn in the years ahead.
No, and I love the commitment that you've made to not only the environment, but to community and, the socialization, a place where people just want to be. So I think you'll definitely be able to utilize that in terms of supporting those kinds of relationships. Now, Calandra, you've had a very interesting view, given the extensive analytics your organization's collecting. What macro trends do you see coming from COVID as it pertains to the workforce?
So, Kate, you and I are both actually in a women's leadership in corporate real estate group, and I think working with a lot of the companies there has been really interesting, given us really good perspective on what sort of the future of real estate is. And on the flip side, with Statebook, I have the privilege of working with over 500 communities and economic development groups across the country. And I think that what we're seeing from the corporate side is primarily a wait and see kind of mentality, where they're taking a step back. Everybody, as you said earlier, was thinking we'd be back in the office by June or July, and now it's, let's wait till the end of 2021 and see where we are and reevaluate. At the same time, I think a lot of large corporations are liquidating space, letting leases expire, like you said earlier, figuring out who are the critical workers that have to come back to the office, and what can we do from a work from home remote team perspective in the short term, and maybe more flex space and minimizing office space going forward. I think we're seeing a lot of small and medium-sized firms, the law firms, the accounting firms, et cetera, closing their doors, doing complete work from home, initially forced, and then kind of saying, well, we don't need to spend these crazy rents in large cities. We can have a remote dispersed team and incredibly high productivity because we're all sitting in front of our laptops all day. So you have to struggle to find that life-work balance instead. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens with some of the bigger cities that are less able to pivot as quickly as some of the smaller cities to accommodate this. I think we're seeing a tremendous amount of movement in both from the actual data that we're working with, particularly mobility data from all of our cell phones that we're analyzing and seeing, you know, the people that, for example, in New York City used to come on the weekends up to the Catskill Mountains or go to Vermont or the Adirondacks, now are just in Vermont or the Adirondacks or the Catskills and working remotely. And so a lot of those sort of secondary, tertiary communities, rural, suburban, are doing very active recruiting of the knowledge workers that are sort of newly location agnostic. And I have full confidence that our cities will recover, but it may be a very different makeup in those cities. And I think technology and data and innovation will become increasingly important to support these new paradigms of work, and particularly remote work. And a lot of the work that we're doing with communities is around how do we provide that last mile broadband so that we can support these workers, and what do we need to do for our infrastructure and supply chains to make this all come together in a productive, cohesive way. So it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward.
Definitely. Thank you for
Hey,
that.
Kate, I've got some questions that in conversations that's been coming up, and if it's okay, we can pose to your panelists and to Steve. With just to have this kind of brain trust here is wonderful. And one of the kind of provocative statements that Steve had, you know, it's really focusing on value delivered to customers, and now Calandra and Jennifer, you have a sounds like pretty mature agile development group, and now remote. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to how, you know, have you seen agile improve the value delivery directly with customers? And has that been challenged at all, you know, as your workforce has gone remote, or has it been improved?
Our agile delivery has been improved in these specific times, specifically because we are able to connect with the people we need right away to get information, and because our collaboration tools and how we use them has improved as well. Now, is it 50% better than it was pre-COVID? No, it might be like 10% better. And we want to focus on how do we retain that improvement, and what's at the essence of that improvement that we can carry forward as part of how we always do our work in the future.
Glenn, do you have any thoughts on that for your experience?
Yeah, I mean, our experience is certainly productivity has never been an issue with my team, because we've always been virtual and agile. I think, if anything, we struggle with the opposite, where we try to encourage our employees to find a live-work balance, because we all tend to be kind of on 24/7 on our laptops, on our devices. You're never disconnected. This morning I was sending emails from about 2 to 3:30 a.m. in New York, just because I was on, and you kind of never turn it off. So I think from our perspective, we have a little bit of the opposite issue, but I think in terms of everybody really contributing to the process and the company, it's something that is very important to us as a culture, because I believe in surrounding myself with people who are smarter than me and have complementary skills, and then really learning from each other. So I think that has been a big part of it. And we've seen incredible success even with our college interns, and, really empowering them along Doug's point, really encouraging people to work from their passion. And I think it's been seamless for us creating the company culture around that sort of a paradigm virtually from day one, and it's worked really well.
It's beautiful. Steve, I'm wondering, with the learning consortium companies, and it looks like you got a couple of candidates here to be part of that as well. Has the remote work challenged value delivery that you've heard, or has it enhanced it, or has it just been?
The studies that have been done showed that it enhanced it, that things were better, that they delivered more, there was less waste, and things got done faster. So yeah, it's it's not conclusive, and it's not 1,000%, but it certainly wasn't worse.
Oh, that's tremendous. Wow, that's, I'm one of those coaches that came out of that space of we have to be face to face. So this is really great to hear that it's working. Especially, in the past, I noticed there was some local people, and then there was individuals who were remote, and then they didn't have a great relationship. And there is something, I think, when everybody's remote. So
I think where it matters is when you're getting started. Forming the team, getting to know each other, I think that's critical. Onboarding new staff, that's critical. But once you know each other, once you're in a groove, once you're in short cycles of team, you have clear goals, you're focused on customers. You don't need the other stuff.
That's great. Yeah, I've picked up a few things of not having a structure just to blame someone, or riding the horses of the workforce, what management means. So now we're going to get a chance to come together in the small group breakout sessions. I think there'll be about half a dozen folks in each. So in case, you're one of the few that haven't been on a Zoom, breakout room, it's pretty easy. We're going to automatically send you to the breakout group. And then 12 minutes later, we'll have 12 minutes to be together, bring you back automatically to the main group, where we'll have a chance to share out a little bit. Most of the groups should have a facilitator assigned. If by chance your group does not, go ahead and designate one. We're about self-management, right? So facilitators, keep track of those themes so we can share them out. We're going to do this two ways. We'll have, naturally, these will just be numbered groups, so there'll be odd-numbered breakout groups formed and even-numbered, and we're going to do some collective intelligence here on two different questions. So the way it's going to work is, if you're in an odd-numbered group, after you get to know each other, ask the question, hey, how much BS work are we seeing in our current organization, in my current organization? And if you're in an even-numbered group, a question for you is, hey, if I had to really reinvent work today, if I can imagine how I'd really like it to be, what's one thing I would change? So I'm just going to paste these real quickly here in the chat, and then also we'll broadcast them out to the group. So see you back in 12 minutes. Thanks all. Hey, welcome back. Okay. Yeah, 12 minutes goes fast, I know. Yeah.
All right, all the rooms are now returned.
Great, yeah. So we're going to hear from a couple of rooms, but all facilitators, please direct chat me your summaries So we will give a summary out of what came up in these sessions by an email PDF to everybody who participated. So, but so we can hear from a couple, and I'm just going to cold call on you, starting with Andrew, if you wouldn't mind. You're group one, and you had the BS question, I believe. What themes did you hear?
So we had an interesting, a small but interesting discussion based on who was in it. Somebody who works for government but is running an agile team within, working for NOAA. And then we had someone who's a leader at Stanford Graduate School of Education in executive ed. So what we learned is both did not see a lot of BS work in their work, but have seen it before. And the root of that is the way things were done. And so where there was BS, it was related to, well, it was always done this way. Academia, it was research. In the case of Brent, who was at NOAA, in government, it was about, well, you know, we've been doing it this way for 30 years. Yeah. So he said he's seen walls, but aggressive action towards really understanding what the purpose of the work is, and using the agile methodology has gone from 75% to 15% BS work on his team.
Wow, that's really great.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, thank you. That's encouraging. You know, in the most bureaucratic environments I can think of that I've been involved with, both government and school, universities. Let me pick from one of the other groups while we still have time. Donna, you had the Imagine the Future question. What themes might have come up in your group? Are you still on?
No, I'm unmuted, which helps. So, you can hear me. Yeah, we had a lovely conversation. It was just very generative, to be honest. I wish I had a tape recorder, but what I did, what I've managed to pull out, hopefully, yeah, it would be a lot easier, was reprioritize empathy over profit, direct empathy to teammates, and one of the, you know, align personal purpose with activities, which is really talking about if we don't have personal purpose clear, in other words, if people aren't clear on what that is, then you've got an opportunity to both derive value as well as create it. So we're not talking about balancing work-life anymore. We're actually talking about blending those two together into a very smooth dynamic, I would say. Also talking about anchoring, you know, what the anchor point is and the right medium. So, and the key element of that is to integrate dynamism into virtual work. So that means like let's just break that box wide open. Let's do some play, because, you know, traditionally there's been so much emphasis on conforming, and that, you know, who wants to do that anymore? It's much more fun to actually be authentic and be real. So I think that hopefully summarizes my groups.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, let's use those funny hat things on the Zoom thing. Right?
Thank you.
All right, great. Yeah, so boy, time's gone fast. Thanks everybody so much for your participation today. Like I said, we'll get the rest of your session summarized and sent out. It's really great that we can have some time together like that as well. So Mike, I think you've got some closing comments, so back to you. And you will need to be off mute too. There you are.
First of all, just real quick on our group, choice was the big thing that people came up with there. They're so happy that there's potential for choice, so first of all, I want to thank our co-sponsors for putting this event together, and really thank our team for all the effort that they've done. And at the same time, I want to go back to this slide here just to remind you that that we can now do something, I think, that's really important when you start small in your own group. As Steve said, gee, Microsoft started small in some group and then it grew from there. So plant that seed. Let's not accept the old world. Let's now move to the new world and realize that we as people can now have more choices, and let's manage around that process. So I think that's where we want to end up. If you can want to get to the last slide, I'll just say that we're going to have our next event. It will be a workshop on November the 19th. We'll be reaching out to you. And one last request with all this wonderful effort and participation is help us build momentum. This is the golden opportunity now to step into this change that we're in right now, where things are in flux, and basically permanently shift us into a different pivot where now the world is going to work around people as opposed to working around structure. If we can accomplish that, I'll be a happy puppy. So thanks, everyone. You'll look at our link here. We'll be sending this out. Join us if you can. And to, again, the team and all of you who participated, thank you very much.